Hi, Oren, thank you so much for the introduction. Just so everybody knows, I did just start the recording, so this session will be recorded. We'll go ahead and send it out afterwards like we always do. But anyway, thank you so much, Oren, for the introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining me in my kitchen today. I know things are changing as we're working from home, so I really appreciate everybody coming and joining us on the webinar. As Oren said, I'm Elizabeth. You guys have probably seen me in some other webinars in the past. So we're really glad that you're coming back and learning some more. And I'll hand it off to Hannah as well to introduce herself.
Thanks, Beth. Good morning, everyone. My name's Hannah, and I'm an SAP support consultant with Pioneer. We may have worked together previously on some support requests, and I'm really excited to be here this morning.
And this presentation will mainly be hands-on. We have a couple of slides just to get us in the motion of what we're going to go through. So,
absolutely. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and turn off my camera just so you guys can focus on what we're doing here. So first of all, again, thank you so much for joining. Our objective today is, as you guys might know, you joined the webinar because you want to learn about alerts and approvals. So our objective today is to really give you guys some great business cases and some tools in your toolbox that will allow you to take what you may or may not know about alerts and approvals yet, expand on that knowledge, and actually deploy them in your business.
Yeah, and you know, the SAP Business One system is really open, and the alerts and approvals, those are two tools that will really give you a lot of controls through different processes. It is very flexible, and in many cases, it's not just about efficiency or data, you know, and make sure you hit your margins and things of that nature. For example, we implemented that for one of our clients who already use SAP, and just one small alerts to give each one of the sales reps an alerts to show them all the quotes they need to follow up on, increased the company's revenue top line by 18% in compared to the period before. So, you know, a lot of great things you can do with alerts and approvals. And the goal of today's session is to show you how to activate them end to end, how to use them, and different business cases that you can apply to your business starting today.
Wonderful, thanks, Oren. So in order to do that, here's our agenda for today. First, we're going to review what alerts and approvals are, some similarities between the two, some differences. From there, we're going to dive into alerts, give you an overview of how you set up alerts, how you can use out-of-the-box features and really quickly set up an alert just right out of the box. And then also from there, show you how you can customize those alerts with any of the queries that you have in your database right now. After that, we're going to switch gears and move to approvals. And we're going to follow kind of the same pattern here. We're going to give you an overview of approvals. I know alerts, maybe more of you guys are familiar with, but maybe not so much in approvals. So we're going to teach you exactly what the approvals are, what they mean, how you set them up, give you some great business cases that you'll be able to use. And let's see, I'm actually going to throw everyone on mute just for now. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, perfect. So, and then after that, we're going to show you, we promise that we won't get too technical, but we are going to show you how you are able to customize your approval processes using queries and, the special syntax that goes along with it. And like I said, we promise we won't get too technical. Afterwards, we're going to give you some documentation, as always, so that you can take what you've learned today and really move forward and be able to use it in your own system. And then, of course, at the end, like always, we're saving some time for Q&A. But feel free, as we go along, ask any questions you might have in the chat. Oren will be watching over that for us, and we'll make sure to stop so we can answer any questions you have. So feel free to ask any questions that you might have in the chat there.
We have 2 comments, happy Friday, and another comment, happy Friday. So happy Friday to all.
Happy Friday. Okay. Perfect. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and pass it back over to Hannah. I want to make sure, Hannah, that you're not muted. I know I went through and muted some. Okay, perfect. You're good. So I'll pass it back over to Hannah and let her get started.
Okay, thanks, Beth. So before we begin, I just want to make sure that we define the terms alerts and approvals. We'll also briefly highlight their major similarities and differences, and then that way you can best know how to apply it to your own personal business needs. So both alerts and approvals will provide a notification in SAP when a certain document or action is taking occurrence. They can both be sent to an internal notification or an email. Where the differences begin is that with alerts, you need to do some configuration of a mailer service to have that feature working in SAP, whereas with approvals, you can have it working as soon as you begin using SAP. And the other main difference is that alerts occur after the fact. So a great example would be if a sales rep adds a sales order, their sales manager could then be notified after they successfully add that document to SAP. Approvals, on the other hand, they work a little differently. They're notified real time, and it also has to require an action from someone else. So with that same example, the sales rep can add a sales order, the approval process will go into effect, and the document will not be officially added yet. At that point, the sales manager will receive a notification, and once they approve that, the document can be added. So now we can move on to a general overview of the alerts, and we can kind of dig into those a little deeper. So to begin with this, first, as I mentioned on the previous slide, there's a setup that you need when working with alerts. So let's go into our services and look for the SAP Business One messaging service. And we want to ensure that this is up and running.
And this is a little bit technical. It is not something that you'll have to do on a daily basis. Once your SAP partner, if it's us, installed SAP for you, that should be running. So we just quickly want to cover the installation.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Oren. And the other place we want to check is the server that we want to ensure that our mailer service is also running there. And we'll briefly show you where we can configure it, but like Oren said, we won't get too deep into the technical details. So we want to ensure that our job service mailer will be running. And if we check out the
And in the meanwhile, there is a question, what if we need more tech details? Please, yes, we have some documentation at the end of this to show, to bring more information.
Wonderful, absolutely. So yeah, we didn't want to get too technical starting out here, but if you do need any help or want to dig deeper, we can share that documentation. So it looks like, Hannah, it looks like the screen is back. Are you seeing the general settings?
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so now that we can access our general settings, I'll quickly show you our inbox where we will receive the alerts, just so as I go through these settings, you'll understand what we're referencing. So the first setting we want to talk about is sending the alerts for activities. So if you're a user who utilizes the activities in SAP, and you know you have a couple meetings or calls scheduled for today, and you want those activities to also be sent as an alert, by selecting this, they will appear here. The other setting is displaying when this inbox pops up. So I'm going to make sure that this is checked. So when I receive an alert, this inbox will automatically pop up. The next setting that we want to review is the update messages. So this will determine how often your inbox automatically refreshes. So during that time, if new alerts have come in since then, they will then appear. I'm going to change mine for the demo for 1 minute, just so we can get alerts as quick as possible.
Not as quick as possible in 1 minute instances. As quick as possible is 0 minutes, right?
Yes. And then the last setting that I want to talk about in the general settings would be this mailer, the specific mailer configuration. So if you're a company who has multiple sister companies, maybe you do business in the US and other companies, and you have multiple databases to account for this, you can set up your specific mailer configuration per database. Before 9.3, you can only set it up per company at the company level. So this is a great feature for those companies.
Excellent. And we have a question if those setups are per user or for the whole company. And I think I can answer that. It's per user. Actually, if you go to the icon of the little person here at the top, you will be able to each person to set it up by itself. So we can see that for the user logged in, although for the default of the company, it was 1 minute or 5 minutes. Now we see for the actual user here is 0.
And I believe, and that's a really great question, I believe that having these services here in this user setup is 9.3 as well. That's a new piece of 9.3 functionality.
One last thing to share with you before we get into the weeds of the alerts and things of that nature. In both, SQL or HANA, you can always have a widget of the messages and alerts. So if it's not appears on your screen, you can drag and drop it here, and that it means that your messages and alerts are going to be visible here and accessible through here.
Beautiful, Oren. Thanks for sharing.
This setup needs to be done by an administrator. It could be done by the user as we showed, but as per company normally is by the super user. One time, and then it catches for the any alerts or approval that you may want to do.
Okay, great. So now that we have our settings taken care of and our basic setup, we can go into the alerts management window, which is found under administration. So the great thing about SAP is that we have several out-of-the-box options already available for us. So this is super helpful. Spending a couple minutes configuring it can already have you with an up and running alert. So for our example, I'm going to go with the deviation from credit limit alert. So the name's already defined. We can update our priority. We can change this to high. So for example, when a sales order is entered and the customer is past their credit limit, that user is notified. However, no one else in the organization at this point will know about it. So a quick way to fix this would be to notify some of our finance users. So what I can do is I can manually go through and I can select some accounting and finance users. Or if I want to speed things up, we can actually assign by the user group level, which is really, really nice. Another good thing about assigning by the user group level is that onboarding new employees is made super easy and it helps eliminate any potential for errors. So if this alert set up and is sending to our finance department, when a new user is added to the finance department, on their very first day, they'll already be receiving alerts that everyone else is also receiving.
Excellent. So I believe you also answered one question we have. Thank you.
Great. So as well as internal alerts, so the inbox that we had showed you, this is where they will appear. If you're a user who's not always in the office at your desk, you're often on the go, you can also send it to your company email as well. So that's another great feature. And then the last thing you need to remember is whenever you're ready to run the alert, just activate it, and you have successfully created an alert.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. And we have a question. Can alerts be set up for managers to approve POs?
No, so this is actually what we'll be getting into as we move into the approvals. So that's kind of the difference there between the alerts and the approvals that Hannah was talking about. For the alerts, they're never going to block an action or stop the PO from being added until it can be approved. That's where you're going to want to use approvals. So great question. And thank you, everybody. By the way, I see the questions popping up over here. And so I really, really appreciate as we're going. I love the engagement. I love the questions. So keep them coming. So any others, as we're looking at the alerts management screen and kind of the setup here, Any questions about that before we move on to some of the business cases and testing them up?
We have a question. This credit limit is on customer basis, and for all customer credit limit will be the same in inbuilt alerts.
Actually, in the alerts, we can define the credit limit amount that we want notified of. So let me go back to that.
And I think to answer your question, so Hannah's going to touch on it right there with the maximum deviation for the credit limit. So what this will do is, you know, if we're putting 5,000 in there, once the credit limit has deviated by, you know, over 5,000 from what's set on the customer master record, and, you know, if you're adding a sales order, for instance, in this case, that's how we have it set up, then that will trigger the alert. So if you want it to be specific, say, you know, for these customers, we want to be notified when they've deviated from their credit limit by over 10,000, but for these other group of customers, we don't want to be notified unless they deviate by over 50,000. That's something that you'd want to do in a kind of custom alert process. So what Hannah showed here so far is just with some out-of-the-box tools, but you can definitely do that on a customer by customer basis. So
yeah,
hopefully,
and we'll show some customer alerts in the next few minutes.
Okay. Perfect. So feel free to add any questions in the chat. But we'll go on from here. Kind of on that note, we've seen here really easily how to set up an alert just with these out-of-the-box alerts. Another one that I want to show you that's really easy to set up out of the box is a deviation from discount percentage. So we're going to look at this in the context of an alert right now. And then in a few minutes when we switch gears to approvals, we'll look at how you can handle this same scenario in an approval context. So for here, let's say that you are a sales manager and you really want to keep watch on, or kind of, you know, keep tabs on your sales employees and, you know, just how much they're quoting, what discounts they're quoting on the sales quotations. You want to, you know, watch out for your gross profits down the line. So it all starts here at your sales quotation and just seeing kind of what discounts they're giving. So this alert, really easily out of the box, you can define a discount percentage, set them up just like Hannah was showing here, to send to your appropriate users. And in this case, I've said, okay, anything over 3% as the sales manager, anything over 3%, I just want to know about. I want to get that alert and know about, you know, when my users are adding sales quotations. So we can actually go in and add a sales quotation here for our Acme Corporation. Go ahead and pick an item. And we set over 3, so let's do 4% discount. We'll go ahead and add the document. And as you see, it adds perfectly, you know, perfectly fine. We get our success message down there and no pop-ups, anything like that. But as we'll see in just a moment, we will get an alert in there that's letting us know that, you know, now there's a document that's deviated from this percentage that we've defined. So I'll let that go. I'm going to move on to my next example, but you will see it pop up. And actually, if I close this, you know, the form will pop up on its own. But some other really great business cases that I think alerts can be really beneficial for. You can set up, I know it's a little more sales focused still, but if we open up our alerts here, we can set up maybe my open sales quotations. So you want your sales employees to know at the beginning of every day what sales quotations they have open and what they need to follow up on. So just as easily as we set this up here, we can set up an alert that shows the same thing for open sales quotations. So instead of having, you know, this bar on the side, we've actually just chosen a query. This is my open sales quotes, added it here, and now every day, or actually in this case, every 10 minutes, they're getting that notification. You can also set it, for instance, if you want it every day at 8 a.m. that you want them to get this alert, you can set it up just like that. Now, again, like we had said, you can do this with any query that you have in your system. So anything that you have here in your query manager that you want to kind of automate and get that alert every day, you can get that. Some other things, we have, expired AR credit memos. You can say, hey, after a year, I really, we're not going to honor that credit anymore. And I want my credit managers to know to just go in and cancel the credit memo. So in that same case, we can create a really easy query like this. And then in the morning, your credit manager will come in and see, hey, okay, we have an expired credit memo, time to go cancel that. So a few different ways there that you can just take queries right out of your system and create alerts. So as we're looking at that, any questions?
Yeah, and as you think of that, it's really could do everything for you. We have many clients using that to kind of have when the tax expiration comes, we want to get few days before an alert to call the client. In other cases, clients that are using serial numbers management or batch numbers and they have expiration, we have that alerts go to multiple people, this batch is about to expire and things of that nature. So a lot of business cases, almost anything happens in the business could trigger an alert. But we have a question, Beth, for what purpose save history tab is there?
So let me open that back up. And that's actually a really great question. Oren, could you maybe touch on that?
Yeah, the save history will save all the results of previous alerts that were sent, but we'll also include that in our blog post that we'll share.
We can include a little bit more information there.
Yeah. So we have a question from Robert Markley. What are the most common alerts that Pioneer sees that clients is using? So a lot of what we talked about, expiration things, things that you want to control, like minimum inventory, I see a lot. Follow up on quotes, I see a lot. Not meeting gross profit percentage, things of that nature, we see quite a bit.
I would also say with opportunities, so any of our customers that are using any of the CRM functionality, there's a lot, as you may know, and I won't dig into it. We do have another webinar that went over all this, but for opportunities, there's a lot of metrics here as you're tracking your sales cycles. So you can create a lot of great alerts there. And I know, again, I keep talking about the sales side, but it's all applicable. That's just that opportunities area where I see some really great alerts coming out of as well.
Yeah, quick question about the PO side, because you asked that. Can alerts be set up for when blanket POs are going to expire that we use for suppliers? Yep. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So I'll just touch quickly. Feel free, again, to ask any more questions that you'd like. I'll just touch quickly on the last little thing I wanted to for alerts, and then we'll switch gears over to approvals. So we wanted to give you this, and we have created one for alerts and one for approvals. As we send it out after the webinar, you guys will be able to kind of dig in a little bit more. But basically, we've just created a couple graphs for you guys that'll let you see some different functionality that's been added by release. So I know I think more of our clients are on 9.2, 9.3 in that area. We are really happy to announce 10.0 is out, I believe, yesterday for general release. So I know some clients I've heard already have their minds set on upgrading. So as we go to approvals, you'll see there's a little bit more that's added in the approvals as well in 10.0. But feel free to take a look at this afterwards as we send out the webinar for you.
Yeah, and today we are demoing with the 9.3 version. We just wanted to bring visibility to clients that are using different versions, just in case some functionality is not there or will be there.
Beautiful. So on that note, feel free, any more questions about alerts? Otherwise, we are going to switch gears to approvals. And with that, I'll hand it over to Hannah to give you guys an overview on the approval process.
Thanks so much, Beth. So now, like Beth said, let's change gears. Let's go to the approval process in SAP. So first, we'll start with going over the approval template. This is where your approvals will be housed. So for our example, Let's imagine that you're a company and you currently don't have any internal controls on your purchasing department. And every once in a while, the purchasing manager sees a order with a doc total greater than 5,000 and they want to be notified of these higher orders. Not only do they want to be notified, but they also wish that they had the opportunity to reject that if they chose to. So for our example, we need to review the originators. We'll go through each of these tabs and define the terms and explain within this example. So the originators are our users in SAP that will be subjected to the approval process. So anytime that Fred Buyer adds a document, it could possibly have to go through the approval process. So our next tab, this is where we select the actual document that we want to go through the approval. So in our case, we'll select the purchase order, but as you can see, we have many other options here and we can create approvals for any of these. Our next tab is the approval stages. So an approval stage is essentially where you define who needs to approve the document going through and how they need to do so. So at this stage, you need a minimum of 1 for it to successfully set up the approval. However, in our example, first it'll go through lower management. If they pass it, then it'll go through upper management. At that point, if both stages approve the document, it'll successfully be created in SAP. So let's just drill into a stage to see how we can define these. So after naming it, I assigned it an authorizer. So James Chan is the user who will be notified, and he will be the one who gets to say whether it's approved or rejected. These two options right here are also good to note: number of approvals required and number of rejections. We could have multiple authorizers here if we want. We could have, say, 2, for example. But if we have only 1 is needed to move it on, that's just up to your personal preference. So if we had James and another user, and we said that we only needed 1 approval for it to move on, as soon as the first person approves, there's no need to wait for the other. It'll successfully move on. And the last tab that we want to define are the terms. So this is where we identify which documents will specifically be subjected to the approval process with their specific criteria. So if we select this Always button, this will basically create an approval anytime that Fred Byers creates a purchase order. It'll have to go through James. So this is a very simple way to pick up all documents of a certain type in the system. If we drill down, there's also 2 other ways to customize it a little bit more specifically. First, we have our out-of-the-box options. Similar to what you saw in alerts, SAP comes with great out-of-the-box options that I was very, very quickly able to select the document total greater than 5,000. So doing this will trigger the approval process for any POs created by Fred greater than $5,000. The last option that Beth will get into in more detail shortly is customizing it with a query. So now I'll pass it off to Beth unless anyone has any questions regarding some more business cases and the query syntax.
So I did see some questions over there. One from Robert Markley. So that's a really great question. He asked, is there any way that all users or employees can be selected as the originators? I have not tried this, but we can try it live, and it does work. Okay, so in this case, what we're doing here, if you want to select all users as the originators, you can click the top user and then shift click the bottom and click choose, and it'll go ahead and add all these users. I'm really glad that that worked. We did it live. So thank you, Mr. Markley, for teaching me something new. I appreciate that. And then Sherry asked, how are approvers set up to be notified that they have a document to approve? So there's a couple different ways. In here, when an approver has a document to approve, they will automatically get something like this in their inbox that says document generation, something like this that says request for approving document update. And in just a second, I'll show you how that flow works. But basically, this is what that approver will see in their inbox, and they'll see any notes that are coming from the document originator, and then they can also drill down right here. There is, this is supported in the mobile app as well. So you can, approve and deny in there. You can approve and deny in here. And then there is actually a great little tip and trick tidbit that I want to share with you guys. So Sherry, thanks for asking that. It kind of moves right into my little trick. So in this case for approvals, as it stands right now, with alerts, you're able to determine if you want that internal alert or if you want an email alert. When you're looking at approvals, generally all you see is that it gives you this internal alert, but you can trigger it to send you emails. So what all you have to do here as you're logged into SAP, if you're the approver of the document, you'll want to click out of office and then say, I'm not in the office, forward incoming messages to my email. And what this will do is anytime you get an approval, it'll actually forward it to your email. So it's a little bit of a roundabout trick there, but it will get those approvals to your email, which is really great. And in just a minute down the road, I'll show you a report that the approvers can use to see their open approvals as well. So great questions. Any other questions as we move forward?
No, but I just put it on the chat, a more detailed description of what the save history does, as related to previous questions.
Gotcha. Thank you. Wonderful. So moving on with the approvals, we'll go ahead and actually open this back up. So moving on with the approvals, we did have Hannah showing you how to set terms here, just when the following applies. And you'll see that a lot of these options here for out-of-the-box settings are similar to your alerts. And so at the beginning of the webinar here, we showed you what it looks like to have a sales discount percentage alert, where if your sales quotation went over, your sales entry staff enters the sales quotation over a certain discount percentage, then that sales manager is going to be set up to get an alert. Now, if you want to go a step further and say, okay, 3% as the sales manager, a 3% discount, I just want to know about, but if they're giving anything over 5%, I really want it to go through me first. So in order to support that scenario, we'll say, in this case, I'm the document originator. So I'll be the one entering that sales quotation. We have our sales quotation set up here as the document. We see that our sales manager is going to be the one approving it. In this case, it's Brad, but for the sake of the demo, I've also added myself on here so we can see that whole flow. And then when we go over to terms, we'll see that we want this approval process to launch when the discount is greater than 5%. And so with just that out of the box options, we can set up that approval really easily. And then we're going to go into our sales quotation to see how that works. So we'll just go ahead and add an identical sales quotation to what we added before. But in this case, let's say we're doing a 7% discount. When we go ahead and add the document, as you might remember with the alerts, it didn't pop up this little box here. It just added and later sent the alert to the appropriate person. In this case, it's going to trigger the approval. So the user will see that immediately. They'll see which approval it's triggering. So in this case, it's a sales discount or a sales quotation discount. And then we can say, please approve, add any notes there. And we'll go ahead and say, okay. Now this tells you that a draft document created and that request for approval was sent. And then you'll see coming in here, we've already gotten this request for approving document generation. So this is what that approver is going to see in their inbox. And then again, just like we showed, they can drill in and approve from there. So that's the simple differences here. Again, just using out of the box functionality, the simple differences between what you can see in alerts and how you can handle that scenario versus how you would be able to handle it with an approval. So any questions before we move on? Okay, I don't see anything in the chat. So we're gonna go ahead. Oh,
Yeah, I see a comment from Sherry about 5 managers that needs approval, only 2 of them getting an email alerts, the other 3 I'm manually sending a text. So it sounds like I'm not sure if that's a question. So Sherry, please let us know if that's the question or if it's an issue you specifically have. And we have a question, can approval be deleted rather than deactivated?
no. Well, actually,
It can be removed if you don't have anything pending or through approvals and it hasn't been approved, because the system always saves for compliance, it saves all the previous approvals and who it went from and things of that nature. So the system will not let you delete approvals that already were activated in the past, but you can make it inactive.
thanks, Oren. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next kind of scenario here, or next use of these approval templates. This, as I promised, we won't get too technical in here, but I do want to show you guys a way that you can use queries and a very simple example of how you can use queries to trigger your approval template. So as we've seen so far, we've just used these out-of-the-box options. But as we move on, maybe you have some more complex scenarios. Maybe you have a UDF and you're saying, okay, well, if the value of this UDF is such, I need to trigger it. Or, there's a lot of kind of different scenarios here. And the one that I'm going to show in our approval scenario, we'll just say we're doing a approval for a purchase order. And we'll just say right now, James Chan is a junior buyer. He's really new, so we just want to make sure to kind of keep tabs on him as he's starting out with his purchasing. So what we're saying here is anytime that James Chan is listed as the buyer on the purchase order, then we'll go ahead and trigger that approval process. So you'll see kind of some funny syntax here. If you're used to formatted searches, this is the same syntax that you're using on formatted searches. So this $ bracket, and then you have the name of the table and the name of the field here. So if you need more information on that, we did do a whole webinar that covers how you get that information, a deeper dive into the syntax. So feel free to reach out or check out our YouTube if you want kind of a deeper dive on that. Otherwise, just know you want the field name and the table name there. And then this select distinct true. So what that tells you is that is our little trigger for the approval, so that when this scenario is true, it triggers that approval. So with that funny query, you can basically take this template and expand it to fit your needs. But this is, again, a very basic example. And then what we would do here is attach this and have our terms based on a user query. So I want to show you guys a really easy way to test that. I know I have this approval template already set up. So what I could do in testing as I'm setting this up is I could go through and create a purchase order, and maybe I get an error, and then I have to go through and update, update my query and try it again. So instead of going through all of that, what you can do is make sure that you have whatever document you want to test, make sure you have that open, and as the active form here, you'll see it's gray when it's your active form, so make sure it's active. And we'll see that James Chan is listed as a buyer here, so in theory, our approval should trigger. So to test that, what we want to do is go to Tools, Queries, User Queries, and then wherever that little query is living in ours, it's living in this approval. So we click on that, and then you'll see this confirmation message down here, and you see true. So that's telling us that yes, once we add this to an approval template, our query is working and it will trigger on the correct purchase order. And then of course, as you go through and test, you want to make sure that when you don't have James Chan listed as the buyer, it won't trigger, and therefore. But that is a really, really great way to test, and it'll solve you or save you a lot of headaches in, adjusting the query, going back and adding it, adjusting it, testing it, all of that. So And it looks like we do have a few questions in here. So will you have enough time today to show a multi-level approval? We could show that. So I know Hannah briefly covered it here. Since it's a kind of demo, the multi-level approval would go to me and then it would go to me again. So it's a little hard to show that in a demo. But essentially what happens, just to kind of talk through it, essentially what happens is as you have these multiple stages, once I approve it, it'll go to the next. And then once they approve it, it'll go to the next, and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, we didn't set that up since it would look a little wonky in the demo environment with me just approving it again and again. But that's a great question. So then we got another one that says when you add the document for the approval process, it saves in the draft, which is true. When the document is approved and after adding the document, the draft didn't delete itself. We need to delete it manually. Can it be deleted automatically? That is a really great question. I'm not sure why it's still sitting in your draft, but that's definitely something that we can look into. At the end of this, we're going to share our emails. So feel free to send me an email and we can look into maybe why it's sitting there in your draft.
Yeah, and there is a way drafts are by default are being saved again for compliance and things of that nature. But if you don't want to see them, you could always click open only, and that will show you only the drafts that are actually open and haven't been posted. And I hope it helps.
Yeah, wonderful tip, Warren. Beautiful. So thanks again for all the questions. I'm going to show you just a couple quick reports that'll really help you with your approvals here. The first one, and you can find them here in your main menu. I'm a big proponent of the search bar, so I like to use that, but you can find them either way. So we have this approval status report and the approval decision report. So I like to think of them, the approval status report, I generally see as using more for those document originators. So your sales order entry people that want to know where their sales quotation is sitting. You have a lot of kind of selection criteria options here. You can determine, I don't really want to see anyone else's. I just want to see my documents. Maybe you just want to see those documents that you have, that have been rejected. Looks like we don't have any. Maybe you want to see pending documents, things of that nature. Looks like we don't have any. Let's kind of open it up a little bit. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I wasn't clicking on the sales quotation. So from there, you can kind of open it up, see exactly which documents you have sitting out there, see the status of them, and drill into any of the drafts here. In this case, we can see, hey, we drilled into the draft. It's sitting there as approved, but it hasn't been added yet. So we can go ahead and add it straight from there. So this one I like to think, is more for those document originators. The other approval report that I wanted to show you guys, I see more for the actual approvers that are coming in. So I know those approvers will get a message up here, their internal messages, but they may also want to kind of approve in mass and make sure that they are seeing everything that's sitting in their queue and everything that needs to be approved. So we'll pick the same thing. I just want to see what's sitting there for me to approve. We can go ahead and run the report. And then you can see in this case, I actually have a purchase order sitting here. I have some sales quotations sitting here. And just from this report, I can go ahead and approve and reject as I go through. And I'll make the notes. We'll go ahead and update. And then once we update, they immediately are removed from this report or our view of this report. And they're sent down their specific approval path. So that one that I rejected is going to go back to that document originator, and the other ones will move forward. But really handy there being able to just kind of approve and reject in mass.
And Beth, I see a question. I think it's more of support related. Recently had a scenario where the approver is unable to change status on a specific pending approval. So Sasha, I'm not sure what is the exact case, but that was a question, Beth. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if it shares some light. And any idea what could cause that?
That's a great question. I think I'd need a little bit more information. So feel free, again, like I said at the end, we'll have our emails on there. So feel free to shoot me an email and we can take a look at what's going on there. But otherwise, great questions. So I wanted to share one more thing here before we kind of wrap up. We'll move through this. So before we wrap up, like we showed you for the alerts, we've also created a little spreadsheet here for our approvals and different added functionality by release. So SAP, as you can see, is really ramping up and adding more approvals. As they go on, they are listening to you guys and even, to kind of highlight some of this 9.3 functionality that was added has been really beneficial. I know for clients that I've worked with has been really beneficial. To give you guys a little bit of background, before 9.3, if you had an approval here that is already kind of in that approval process, you couldn't update it there. You would have to, in general, you'd have to go back and cancel it, recreate a document. It would go through the approval process. So 9.3 added this ability to be able to update something if it's in a pending or approved stage, and it can re-trigger that approval process. This is up to your discretion. If you don't want that functionality, it's just a checkbox, so you can choose if you do or don't want that functionality. And then again, as we move to 10.0, I really think this is my favorite approval functionality here is enabling the authorizer to update the document draft. So I see this and I hear this a lot, this question that if the authorizer has one thing, they just, well, hey, I don't want to give them that discount, but maybe, if we go down half a percentage, I'm good with that. Instead of being able to, before 10.0, instead of being able to make that change on the document, they would have to type that out as a note, reject the document, it would send back to the originator would make that change, and then it would go through the process again. In this case, the authorizer can make that change to the document themselves. So it really saves a lot of kind of back and forth work there.
And I just want to mention something. A lot of the enhancement that SAP does is really based on your feedback. So please share with us any additional feedback. For example, some of the additions they added in 9.3 and 10.0 are directly because we got feedback from clients, and in the conference we sat with the product owners of SAP and their product management team and gave them that status, and we see that they're adding that to the product. So we have a direct relationship with them, so feel free to give us, to continue bringing us that feedback.
Absolutely. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Hannah to wrap things up with the documentation. It looks like we did receive one more question first. The authorizer didn't receive the message for approval from the originator, at least for 30 minutes in a few cases.
Yep.
Do you have any?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so, and Oren, correct me if you're thinking something differently, but I think you may want to check that setting that we talked about at the beginning, that setting about updating your inbox. Because if it's set to, maybe 30 minutes, then it's not updating as fast. For ours, we set it to 0 or 1 minute intervals there. So you're seeing that approval pop up really fast, but I would check that setting.
Yeah, you're totally right. And I think the default is you install SAP is 30 minutes. So that setup exactly can be modified.
Wonderful. All right, so I will throw it back over to Hannah to cover some documentation.
Great. So we've compiled a list of some documentation that can help you after this webinar ends. To start, we provided some SAP documentation. There's a couple of brief videos just recapping some of the things that we did today. There's also our YouTube channel. You can always go there to check out our other webinars. There's also our LinkedIn page. And lastly, Pioneer B1, you can contact us. We'll have our emails on the other slide if you want to reach out to us with more specific questions after this. And lastly, Google. There's always a bunch of different things on there, and there's always great resources if you search for them, but we've also just wanted to provide a couple to give you a good starting point. And then moving on, let's just do a quick summary and recap what we talked about over the past hour. So first, we began with defining the alerts and approvals. The major takeaway from this is that alerts provide a notification and they let you know after the fact, after the document's been successfully added. Approvals, on the other hand, they have another level of internal control. The document will not be added until an authorizer approves it. We went into the alerts overview. We showed you some settings regarding the inbox and how often you can see it. We also showed you where to set up alerts in the alerts management. And then we went into some specific business cases and went through some reports that would be very helpful to have alerts automatically run that. After that, we showed examples of customizing the alerts through queries. And the main takeaway from that is that you can use pre-existing queries in your system with that. So that's a really quick and easy way to customize it. After that, we kind of summarized alerts, and then we shifted on to approvals. We did an overview of where you can set up the approvals, and that'll take place in the approval template. And you also have to remember to define your approval stages as well. After that, we covered some business cases and also customized the approvals through queries. We also provided a great example of the specific syntax you can use. So feel free to refer back to that in this video, or you can always contact us if you have some specific questions regarding that. So I hope after all of this, everyone has a better understanding of alerts and approvals and in what situations they can work for their business. And thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. And we have one question. When we'll receive this recording? Realize the invite went to spam, so I want to look out for it. We're going to send it next week, normally within 3 days. So by Wednesday, we should get it out, the recording of this. And then we have a great feedback from another person here on the group answering Sasha and his specific scenario. He's saying that it may occur when 2 or more peers add documents that trigger the approval procedure, and when one peer is not authorized to see the other peer's document. So thank you so much for that. Yes, I agree. That could be one case.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Any other questions? You may want to open the lines now, Beth, for verbal questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me. Okay, beautiful. So I open the lines. Feel free if you want to ask, any questions now, feel free to do that verbally or in the chat.
And while people entering questions, I really want to thank you, Elizabeth and Hannah, for a great preparation, for a great execution of this training. I think it will give the community of our clients and generally the SAP Business One clients a lot of knowledge and understanding and business cases, how to utilize that to make their business better, proactive on different business issues and things of that nature. And like you said, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know, shoot us an email or interact with us in any capacity you wish. Any questions, last questions before we wrap up here?
Thank you, Hannah, Elizabeth, and Oren. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much, Sherry. And we'll touch base after this. I'll shoot you an email about the users.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for joining.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Beth.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. And again, our emails, like we said, mine and Hannah's emails are down here. feel free, and you also may know Oren's email, Oren at Pioneer B1. So feel free to email any of all of us. God, you made me